All right, I want you to picture two of the most powerful men on earth sitting down in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. Trade is on the table, Taiwan is on the table, the war in the Mideast is on the table, and the very first thing Xi Jinping wants to talk about is a dead Greek guy who's been in the ground for 2,400 years. So what did he say, and should the rest of us be a little nervous about it? So here's the setup. When President Trump met President Xi in Beijing, Xi opened with a question. Not, how was the flight? Not, can I get you a coffee? He asked, can China and the United States avoid the Thucydides trap? I hope I'm saying that right. And if your reaction was the same as half of America's, it was, what is the Thucydides trap? Listen, you're not alone. Searches for that phrase went absolutely vertical the second he said it. So let's break it down, because once you get it, you can't unget it. Thucydides was an ancient Greek historian. He lived through a massive war between two city-states, Athens and Sparta. Sparta was the established top dog, the reigning heavyweight champ, been on the throne forever. Athens was the up-and-comer, getting richer, stronger, cockier, and Thucydides wrote down this one brutal observation. The war happened because Athens was rising, and the fear that rise put into Sparta made the war basically unavoidable. That's it. That's the whole nugget. Not greed, not territory, not some insult at a dinner party, just fear of being overtaken. Now, fast forward a couple thousand years, a Harvard professor named Graham Allison dusts off that idea, slaps a catchy name on it, the Thucydides trap, and points it straight at the US and China. And he didn't just theorize, he did the homework. He and his team dug through the last 500 years of history and found 16 cases where a rising power bumped up against a ruling power. And here's the number that should get your attention. 12 of those 16, they ended in war. 12 out of the 16. That's a 75% failure rate. If your airline had that record, you would never fly again. So when you strip away the toga and the fancy name, the trap is just this. When a new guy is climbing and the old guy is sweating, history says somebody throws a punch. The ruling power is America. The rising power is China. We are, allegedly, Sparta. They are the Athens. And Xi sat across from Trump and basically said, so are we going to do this the dumb way or the smart way? So a question here is, do you think the US and China are actually headed for a real conflict in your lifetime? Or is this all just very expensive saber rattling? Now here's where it gets spicy. Because why Xi said it matters as much as what it means. On the surface, invoking the Thucydides trap sounds almost like a peace offering. Hey, let's both be aware of this trap so we don't fall in it. Very wise, very zen, very fortune cookie. But diplomats don't pick words by accident. And there's a sharper reading underneath. By framing it this way, Xi is quietly casting China as Athens, a rising power, the future, and the United States as Sparta, the old champ on the way out. In fact, after the meeting, Trump himself said Xi had called America a declining nation. So that friendly history lesson, it came with a little business card attached that read, hey, I'm the future, you're the past. That, my friends, is what we call a velvet brick. Soft on the outside, still a brick. And it wasn't subtle background music either. In that same meeting, Xi warned Trump that mishandling Taiwan could push the two countries into actual conflict. He said independence and peace across the strait are as irreconcilable as fire and water. So put it together. Open with the war analogy, follow up with a Taiwan warning, and we have to say that's not coincidence. That's a man setting the table and then showing you the knives. Here's the part I find fascinating though, and it's why this isn't just doom and gloom. Xi has actually been using this phrase for over a decade, going back to 2013, and his whole point has consistently been that the trap is not a prophecy, it's a warning. His argument is that war is only inevitable if both sides are dumb enough to sleepwalk into it. It's what he calls a strategic miscalculation. And honestly, even Graham Allison, the guy who coined the term, agrees with that. Remember those 16 cases, the 12 wars? But 4 did not end in war. 4 times, the rising power and the ruling power looked at the cliff and chose not to drive off it. The trap has an exit. It's just that historically, most people are too proud or too scared to take it. So that's the whole story in a nutshell. The Thucydides trap is the idea that when a rising power scares an established power, war tends to follow. 3 times out of 4, going back 5 centuries. Xi brought it up to remind Trump of exactly that, while also gently, and not so gently, suggesting China is the one on the way up. And whether the next decade is a totally fetched story of 2 giants managing to share the playground, or a much darker one, comes down to that 4 out of 16 question. Are these 2 countries smart enough and humble enough to be the exception instead of the rule? The ancient Greeks left us the warning. 2,500 years later, we get to find out if anyone was actually taking notes. So what do you think? Do we dodge the trap, or do we walk right into it?